Welcome to the channel, guys. Hope you're having a great day. Make sure to be somewhere comfortable. Grab your coffee or your tea and let's get into this Reddit cryptid encounters.
The Chupacabra of Los Angeles.
Submitted by Complex Economist 565. I, female, was in my early 20s, hitchhiking the west coast of the USA. I had been dropped off in the outskirts of LA. Exploring the area, I discovered a discreet and overgrown section of cemented canal. I set up my tent there and had an uneventful night. Don't do this, flash foods are real. In the morning, I left the tent with a few heavier, replaceable items, dog food, canned goods, and went into the city proper to busk. When I returned to camp, my heart sank when I noticed my tent was on the other side of the trickling stream in the canal. I thought someone had vandalized or stolen some of my things. I opened the tent to find everything as I had left it. Exactly as I had left it. I started to gaslight myself. Oh, you were tired last night and exciting this morning. You came in off a different street. Still, I felt uneasy. It was too late to find a different spot, so I resigned myself to moving my tent back across the stream. I curled up with my dog in my lap and my knife at my side in case whoever moved my tent came back. Unable to fall asleep, I read by the light of a street lamp. The book distracted me from the day's events, yet sleep did not come. Hours passed, how many I cannot say. Eventually, the soft hum of hungry mosquitoes was cut with the rhythmic click-clack of claws on cement. A sense of dread washed over me. I grabbed my knife in one hand and pulled my dog in closer to keep her calm and quiet. My blood froze as the footstep drew closer. I listened. It only sounded like one critter, no human accompanying it. Trying to calm down, I thought, no need to worry, no need to bother it, it will pass. Until the steps stopped, directly across the stream. It paused, then began sniffing and scratching at the ground. Curiosity got the better of me and I slowly shifted myself to peek through the netting at the top of the tent. I saw a ghastly creature lurking right where my tent had been. This thing was black and patterned with dust. It was barrel-chested and hunchbacked with feet that looked too large for it. The creature had a mane of fur from the face down to the back, when the tail should have been, and the rest of its skin was pulled tight against bone. It couldn't have been more than 30 pounds, half the size of my dog, yet I was terrified of it. My gut told me I did not want this thing to see me, so I scrunched myself back down. I gripped my dog and knife tightly as I listened. It paced back and forth, stopping to scratch or sniff. Its demeanor grew more frantic, its pace quickened. It began growling and snapping its jaws in the air. I waited silently, knife poised, for what felt like forever. Suddenly it stopped. It turned and casually headed back down the canal the same way it had come. I could not sleep the rest of the night. I sat there, gripping my dog and knife until the sun rose. At the first sign of day, I packed everything up. Before I left, curiosity got the better of me again. I crossed the stream and looked where the creature had been. The ground was littered with scratch marks. I took a deep breath and left. I've never been back to LA since then. Never before or since have I been scared of an animal like that. I can't be certain what happened that dim, humid night. All I know is I will carry that feeling for the rest of my life. That feeling of being prey to something unnatural. Something sharp, hungry, and skittering. Chupacabra.
Scary Goatman Story.
Submitted by the fake NLE Choppa. So we ended up playing football. Messing around with me, there's the white kid Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and then 4 of their friends. In total, there were 5 girls and 6 boys. We were around 15 to 17 and just wasted the day away. Eventually, we head back to the camp and pull out some stuff for a campfire, even though the trailers both had the kitchenettes. Tanner says that his family's property sits up against my uncle's. He wants to run home and ask his dad if he can come out camping with us. My cousin Rooster says he's going to go with him since it's going to get dark soon. One of the girls also wants to tag along. It's about 7 o'clock and it's starting to get pretty dark. They grab flashlights and take the trail towards Tan's property. The rest of us chill, we make s'mores, drink, and kiss on the girls. About 30 or 40 minutes later, there's the smell of ozone again. You could notice it over the scent of the fire we had started. This really nasty, coppery smell, like right after you have a nosebleed and it stopped. It wasn't exactly like dried blood, but it was that metallic, back of your throat smell. We immediately think that it's some kind of electrical malfunction or that someone left a hot plate on or something. We search the trailers and nothing's on, but we can all smell it. All of a sudden, we can hear people booking it down the path toward us. Rooster, Tan, and the girl all come running into the clearing, out of breath. And they don't even break stride. They all run into the trailer, right by where the fire is. We all get out of there and into the trailers. They end up calming down. Even Rooster is crying his eyes out at this point. All the while, the fire is guttering lower and lower, so my cousins say forget it and are about to go outside and get the generator out of a shed between the trailers. Tanner goes, "No, lock the front door. Nobody else is going outside." He'd been crying too. His eyes are bloodshot and puffy and his pants are dirty. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house. His father said sure, he could go out camping, but to make sure they were careful on the way back, and that maybe they should take one of the hunting rifles just in case. Evidently Tanner had seen something in the yard a few days before. One of their pigs had been ripped up and half eaten. They assumed it was just some big cats or coyotes, even though they don't usually mess with live animals. Tanner went upstairs, packed his stuff, and told his dad they would be okay without the rifle because coyotes avoid people. Then they started walking back toward where we were camping. Rooster finally stops crying and shaking. The girl already had, but was now just staring out of the window with a dumb look on her face. He says they had gotten halfway into the woods toward the camp when they'd started to hear stuff in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they weren't sure at first what it was. The girl says that she heard something in the bushes right off the trail. They all beamed their flashlight over there and there was someone standing in the woods in a little hollow. Rooster said they shouted at him and told him that he was scaring them and what a jerk he was. He says that's when he realized that the guy was facing away from them. They keep walking and they start smelling that nasty coppery ozone smell. They say that they look off into the forest on the opposite side, and there's a dude standing there too, backward, slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking and Tan keeps going. I should have taken the rifle. As they're telling the story, the smell is still super strong, even inside the cabin. They say that after they started walking faster, a kind of low gibbering had begun coming from both sides of the wood. As they booked it back to the trailer, the girl said she flashed her light out to the side of them and saw something jerking itself through the woods. The gibbering just got louder and louder, and when they could see the light from our campfire, something had come out of the woods about 40 yards behind them onto the track. Then they just flat out ran as hard as they could to the trailer. So we're out in the woods, and we're assuming at this point it's some rednecks or something trying to mess with us. All of a sudden, my other cousin, Junior, starts going on about how he went to school with a native kid that was telling him about the goatman or something. We promptly tell him to shut up because we don't need any spooky talk right now. But he just keeps going on and on about how it's the goatman and we're in his woods and blah blah blah. Now at the time, I had never heard of this goatman or any of that. But then a couple of years ago, the year before I graduated from college, I had a Manom for a roommate and I ended up asking him about it. And to sum it up, it's basically a man with the head of a goat, and he can shapeshift and get among groups of people to terrorize them. It's also supposed to be kind of like the Wendigo. It's bad mojo to even talk about, and even worse if you see it. Keep in mind, I didn't know this back when I was 16. So my cousin is going, the goat man is going to get in and get us. The girls are all terrified, and my cousins and I are all trying to figure out if it's just some hillbillies or an animal. All of a sudden, the smell just goes away. To this day, I haven't even experienced anything like it. Obviously, smells usually fade away or lessen, but it literally was just there 1 second and not the next. So it's after an hour, making it around 9 or 10, We stopped freaking out enough to go back outside and stroke the fire again. We figure it was just some jerks trying to mess with us, so we don't go back home, because we think if we do, they'll chase us through the woods or something crazy. Nothing else weird happens that night. We stay another night, and for the main part of that night, nothing happens. But at about 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories. As someone is finishing some spooky story, I don't remember what about, the smell comes back. And it's so strong that one of the girls literally starts vomiting. I stand up, and you can actually feel how clammy the air is. I say we should get inside, and that this isn't right. We should have just left. We all go back inside, and we're standing around. Cousin keeps going on about how it's the goatman. My other cousin Rooster tries to shut him up, and all the while I'm just feeling that something is wrong, and I can't figure out what it is. We end up sitting in there for a while. The smell is just as strong, and we're terrified and all huddled in this camper. We end up cooking brats for everybody because nobody wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats. We have a total of 3 packs. I grill them up on the stove and give everybody a hot dog, then get mine. While one of my cousins gets up and goes over to the pot to get another one. He starts grumbling about how I got 2 brats and everybody else only got 1. I look at him like he's stupid. I tell him that everybody only got 1 because there were only 12 brats, and that if he wanted more, he should open up a new pack and cook some more. That's when the girl that had been out with Rooster and Tan just starts screaming, "Oh Jesus, oh Lord, get it out." She's crying and shivering, and then it dawns on the cousin standing up what was wrong. Me and him both glance around the room, and I feel my heart sink. I run out of the cabin, and the girl runs with us. The trailer door is banging against the side of the trailer as everybody books it out. One of my cousin's friends asks us what was wrong. I start counting us. There's only 11 now. I kid you not, my cousin verified. There had been 12 people in the cabin, but being that everybody didn't really know each other well, nobody had noticed the whole time that there was an extra person. And then I realized earlier that I had kind of noticed something was off. You know how when you're just messing around having a good time that you don't sweat the small stuff and you don't always keep track of certain things? I'm dead sure that someone else had been in the trailer with us and that he had been there for at least a day, eating with us. What makes it worse is that I couldn't figure out who it was because I don't think anyone ever actually interacted with the other person, the goatman. The girl kept praying to Jesus and we're all sitting outside. Eventually we get big sticks and go back into the cabin. But there's nobody in there. We count again. There's 11 people. Go back into the trailer and lock the door. We explain what happened. The girl says that she realized too, and that when she was about to say something, the person sitting next to her had grabbed her leg hard, leaned over toward her, and said something she couldn't understand. So we are pretty much scared as heck as we huddle together and I fall asleep. When I wake up, the sun is just coming up. And half the people are asleep, and the other half are packing our stuff up. We all want to walk back home, but like 4 people want to stay until the sun is all the way up. Some people think that we're just messing around and still want to stay at the trailers. I just want to get out of the woods. The girl's name was Kira, the one that the goatman had touched. Anyway, I asked her if she really thinks it was something bad, and she said she just wants to go home and doesn't want to be out in the woods alone for another night. So we decide to split up. The 4 that want to go can go, but I have to stay because I have the keys to the cabin and it's my uncle's and I have to lock up. I'm super irritated at this point because I feel like people aren't taking this seriously. I definitely didn't want to be out in the woods for another night. I spent the rest of the day trying to get the rest of the people, now 4 girls and 4 guys, to get out of Dodge. Tanner leaves them to go get a rifle and says he's coming back. So there are just 7 of us left by 4 p.m. Around 5 p.m. he hasn't made it back. We're getting extremely antsy, and the only reason I stopped begging them to pack up and leave was because he went to get a gun. It's about 5:30 or 6 when the one cousin that did go out to the woods with Rooster starts going crazy again. She starts going, "I shouldn't have done this, we should have left." And we're all like, "What are you talking about?" She says she thought the goatman was just a story and that they had been messing with us when we were going back to the cabin. and that she had grabbed his hand while walking back to the cabin, and that it looked too much like a human's, too much to be anything else. So I'm just completely losing my temper now. I ask her how long she thinks it had been in the trailer, and she says since the first night, because it was sleeping in a corner on some bags when she was walking back to the cabin, and that it touched her leg. She says that it didn't actually touch her until the morning when all the stuff was going down. So I'm like, you can talk to the goatman? So she starts crying and shaking, and Rooster and the cousins are looking around the room and trying to figure out what to do. The guy from earlier that had checked the cabin when we went back inside was like, I'm not staying here, we have to leave. We all get ready to go, and all the girls pack their stuff. We count again, and there's still only 11 people, so we think we're good to go. We get off the cabin, and we're just leaving, walking back towards the trails. And the girls in the group think that they should be up front, so one of the guys is trying to tell them that he should go first because he's the oldest. We don't think anything of it, but Tan hasn't come back. We have to keep going. So we're walking towards the road, and we think that Tan just went ahead and went home. We get to the road, and nothing else happens. We look at each other and realize that Tan isn't with us, and we have 11 people again. We're now finally walking back home. We have to cross a wooden bridge about 20 yards from the trailhead. We look back, and there's someone standing on the other side of the bridge. Rooster turns around and starts running back to the trailer. He just takes off, and we all start running in different directions. We all stop and look around the area where we were camping, and there isn't anyone there. Tan never comes back. The worst part is that we all couldn't remember whether or not he was there in the first place. So we don't know if we left him, or if he got killed by the goatman or what. But to this day, we still get that smell sometimes. When we talk about it, it just comes back.
A skinwalker haunts Pinot Level.
As some context, I'm a 34-year-old Native American from the northwestern portion of California, growing up and almost always living on the reservation. For the first 19 years of my life, I have never experienced anything paranormal beyond seeing shadows that move from the corner of my view from within my grandmother's home, where I was raised. These fleeting views of what I came to call shadow people were very frightening and were seen in very high detail, but once outside, the shadows never were the same as viewed from the indoors. My grandmother always denied this, but as I learned later in life, these were no mere illusions. I've never gotten a concrete finding on what these shadows possibly were, but I have come to the conclusion that these entities were residual spiritual energy of the few people who had passed within the confines of the small home, namely my uncle, my great-grandmother, and grandfather. These entities were frightening, but non-threatening, as if they were watching from a distance to make sure that life within the home was safe. I do have a couple of incidents of footsteps within the home despite everyone being sound asleep, a definitive creaking that could only be footsteps from an adult, as a child of my size met little to no noise passing through the home, but when my mother or grandmother walked through, there was nearly the same definitive sound. The invisible perpetrator would sometimes stop midway through the house to stop at my bedroom and stand outside the doorway. And I had no door but a curtain, but never crossing the threshold. This were surely the same entities that were those shadow people. I felt it inside me, but I still was afraid, despite them having never posed harm to anyone. Skip forward 25 years. My grandmother has since passed on a decade ago, and the only person within this home is now myself, my father having passed as well, and my mother having moved into California's Bay Area since then. The shadows haven't appeared, and the house hasn't creaked on its own since my grandmother passed away, leaving me to believe the spirits were looking after my nana all those years to keep her company, despite her being in utter denial of their existence. At age 30, I had begun a tradition of exploring back in Montgomery woods on random evenings when the mood struck me, wandering through the unkempt area for hours at a time, always finding my way out via a creek bed that ran down from the mountains into the valley below that represented my reservation and the town of Ukiah below. Fast forward to this year, June 2024. I was well out on one of aforementioned explorations of the woods behind my home, everything going as it normally did for about an hour or so into my journey, when I suddenly noticed that the entire woods had seemingly went silent. This silence was overwhelming and almost so intense it rang in my ears after the normal night sounds I was used to had vanished into seemingly nothingness. Even the wind seemed to have held its breath in fear of whatever was to come. The fading warmth of the early summer was sucked from the area almost as soon as I had noticed the lack of sound that permeated about the wooded area. I exhaled deeply once in staring bewilderment as the breath actually came out warm enough to mist in the now rapidly cooling air. I knew there must be something amiss in this woods, and it was something bad. My gut was doing flip-flops inside me as I stared about my surroundings for a few moments and ready my 32 that I always carried on my person in these remote excursions, the area being known for numerous mountain lions and coyotes. Either could be a reason for the silence, but not the sudden cold spike. Something in my blood told me I needed to get out of there. As if on with this thought in my mind, began to hear voices from the woods, or rather a single voice that seemed to be heavily distorted and forced, as if gasped out by the last breaths of a monotone voice. This voice sent a shiver down my spine as I began to back away down the hillside toward the creek that I used to make my descent into the valley below. My blood was running like the flow in Alaska, ice cold, to the point it numbed my other senses. As soon as I broke the clearing and began to increase my pace towards the seeming safety of the creek pass, the voice seemed to grow stronger, more steady in its tenor and more mechanical. Forced, "Hey," I understood. The voice of my grandmother seemed to speak to me from everywhere at once, making my heart skip a beat and forcing me to pick up my pace even further, almost half jogging to increase my speed without greasing the loose clay on the mostly unkept trail, making me slip and possibly fall into the abyss of the gorge. I reached the hardest part of my journey as the voice seemed to grow stronger and began saying more phrases, as if it knew I was scared and was escaping its web. It began saying things to the extent of, "Hey honey, come here and help your grandmother. I found something I need you to help me with." I knew I could not respond to these words, despite how much they sounded like my grandmother. No matter how much the words made me want to run and see the woman that sacrificed so much in order to see me succeed. But I knew what the creature was, and I knew it would be deaf if I listened to those words. I had made it into the gorge via the only trail that led into it. The rest sheer walls of clay beside the designated area that leads up to the graveyard, and the end of the creek that was over 2 miles away. The voice began to come at me from all directions, booming down about, "How can you leave your sick grandmother here? Come help me, I've fallen." These words hurt my heart to the core, but I could not stop going as I knew the stories of what has happened to those who answer voices in the woods that don't run when they smell putrid death within these woods. So that's what I did, kept my pace all the way until I reached my small home, the smell seemingly to have passed as soon as I left the creek, but I felt like it still watched me getting away, as if it wanted me to, so it could catch me later. It's been a week now, and I hear its voice outside my home, my grandmother begging me to help. The shadows now hold a more sinister entity. So yeah guys, hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, leave a like, maybe even subscribe to show your support. And by the way, if you have an interesting story like this, make sure to leave it down in the comments, and if it's interesting enough, I'll even feature it in a future video. So have a good one. Peace.